Hi, I'm Avalon.
I'm Sabrina.
And I'm Jasmine.
Welcome to Fun and Friends, where we read and post random videos. And that was like...
It was Fur and Friends.
No.
Fur and Friends.
Fun and Friends. Because it was like fun and then fur, like
Friends.
the doggy.
Fur ends. I knew
fur
there was
ends.
fur in there
Fun
somewhere.
and fur ends.
Fun and fur ends. Because
Right.
Chewy makes an appearance.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
so-
we had some Chewy bits.
Chihuahuas. Anyways.
Welcome back for chapter 2.
Yes, that. Sorry, I
Chapter
just
2.
I've been up since.
It's been a long
early.
day.
Yes. It's Friday. It's Friday. It's Friday. Okay, sorry. You're just like, I don't know these people. Okay, chapter 2. The Art of Kidnapping.
Let's skedaddle.
By the time the sun extinguished, the children were long locked away. Through bedroom shutters, they peeked at torch-armed fathers, sisters, grandmothers lined around the dark forest, daring the schoolmaster to cross the ring of fire. But, well, you know what we forgot to do? We forgot to do a recap. I think Jasmine should do the recap.
You should. You chose.
Okay. In the first chapter, you get to meet Agatha and... What was her name? The girl?
Sophie.
And Sophie. And Sophie is very much looking forward to the idea of getting captured and kidnapped to go to this fantasy world. And Agatha is very apathetic and lacking in the beliefs of this area. So we will see who's right. Is there a fairy tale world where they might get whisked away, or is there not?
And you forgot the fact that it was like one person's good and one person's evil. That's kind of important.
And Sophie thinks she's all good.
I was not prepared to do a recap. This is
Be prepared. You're doing recaps from
Yeah.
now on. It's Jasmine recap. She does Sabrina recap for
The other one.
Vampire
Vampire
Diaries.
Diaries.
It'd be nice to know ahead of time. I
Well,
have to
now you
research
know.
things.
Welcome.
you know. Okay, back to this.
Get your ShamWow out of here.
But while shivering children tightened their window screws, Sophie prepared to undo hers. She wanted this kidnapping to be as convenient as possible. Barricaded in her room, she laid out hairpins, tweezers, nail files, and went to work.
Oh my gosh.
Gosh.
The first kidnappings happened 200 years before. Some years it was 2 boys taken. Some years it was 2 girls taken. Sometimes one of each. The ages were just as fickle. One could be 16, the other 14, or both turned 12. But at first the choices seemed random. Soon the pattern became clear. One was always beautiful and good, and the other the child every parent always wanted, and the other was homely and odd and an outcast from birth. An opposing pair plucked from youth and spirited away. Naturally, the villagers blamed bears. No one had ever seen a bear in Galvadin, but this made them more determined to find one. 4 years later, when 2 children vanished, the villagers admitted that they
Keep going. You're fine.
should have been more specific and declared black bears were the culprit. Bears so black they blended into the night. But when children continued to disappear every 4 years, the village shifted their attention to burrowing bears, then phantom bears, then bears in disguise, until it became clear it wasn't bears at all.
Never heard of such species before. and this is my major.
I just think of like bears dressed up in like clown outfits. Like,
Yeah.
Graduating tomorrow, I'm going to walk across the thing and like, just think of all the bears we've never met before. Like the bears in disguise and the bears of the night.
the phantom bears. But while frantic villagers spawned new theories, the sinkhole theory, the flying cannibal theory, the children of Galvadin began to notice something suspicious. As they studied the dozens of missing posters tacked up in the square, the faces of these lost boys and girls seemed oddly familiar. That's when they opened up their storybooks and found kidnapped children. Jack, taken 100 years before, hadn't aged a bit. There was some paint with some... He was painted with some moppy hair, pinked dimples, and crooked smile that had made him so popular with the girls of Galvadin. Only now he had a beanstalk in his back garden and a weakness for magic beans. Meanwhile, Agnes, the pointy-eared freckled hooligan who had vanished with Jack the same year, had been transformed into a pointy-eared freckled giant at the top of Jack's beanstalk. The 2 boys had found their way into a fairy tale. But when the children presented the storybook theory, the adults responded as adults often do. They patted the children's head and returned to sinkholes and cannibals. But then the children showed them more familiar faces taken 50 years before. Sweet Anya now sat on moonlit rocks in a painting as the Little Mermaid, while cruel Estra had become a devious sea witch. Philip, the priest's uptight son, had grown into the cunning little tailor, while pompous Gula spooked children as the Witch of the Wood. Stories of children kidnapped in pairs had found new lives in Storybook world. One is good, one is evil. The books came from Mr. Duelaville's Storybook shop, a musty nook between Batterby's bakery and Pickled Pig Pub. The problem, of course, was where old Mr. Duelaville got these storybooks.
I have one interesting thing with Mr. Deweyville. You know what it reminds me of?
What?
Dewey the librarian in Tinkerbell with her sister.
Oh, that's
It's kind of funny that there's another Dewey.
I like that. Good.
I wonder if that has a connection to like a
Dewey
old...
I think it has to do with the Dewey Decimal System. They just like calling him Dewey.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Cool. Yeah.
Once a year on a morning he could not predict, he would arrive at his shop to find a box of books waiting inside. Four brand new fairy tales, one copy of each. Mr. Deweyville would hang a sign on his shop door, closed until further notice. Then he huddled in the back room day after day, diligently copying the new tales by hand until he had enough books for every child in Galvadin. As for the mysterious originals, they'd appear one morning in the shop window, a sign that Mr. Deweyville had finished his exhausting task at last. He'd opened his doors to a 3-mile line that snaked through the square, down hill slopes, and the lake, jammed with children thirsty for new tales, and parents desperate to see if any of the missing had made it into this year's tales. Needless to say, the Council of Elders had plenty of questions for Mr. Deweyville.
Try that again.
When asked who sent the books, Mr. Deweyville said he hadn't the faintest idea. When asked how long the books had been appearing, Mr. Deweyville said he couldn't remember a time when the books did not appear. When asked whether he had ever questioned this magical appearance of the books, Mr. Deweyville replied, "Where else would storybooks come from?" Then the elders noticed something else about Mr. Deweyville's books. All the villages in them looked like Galvadin. The same lakeshore cottages, beautiful eaves, the same purple and green tulips along the dirt roads.
Oh, the purple and green tulips.
The same crimson
all these
carriages.
connections.
Wood front shops, yellow schoolhouse, and leaning clock tower only drawn as fantasy in a land far, far away. These storybook villages existed for only one purpose, to begin a fairy tale and to end it. Everything between the beginning and the end happened in dark, endless woods and surrounded the town. Are you taking a shower over there?
I think it used to have like a seal around it, and it's gone. So
I was like, now
I
you are
saw that
all
too.
wet.
I'm like your dog. You have a hole in my mouth.
That's when they noticed that Galvadin, too, was surrounded by dark, endless woods. Back when the children first started to disappear, villages stormed the forest to find them, only to be repelled by storms, floods, cyclones, and falling trees. When they finally braved their way through, they found a town hiding beyond the trees and vengefully besieged it, only to discover it was their own. Indeed, no matter where the villagers entered the woods, they came out right where they started. The woods, it seemed, had no intention of returning their children, and one day they found out why. Mr. Deweyville had finished unpacking the year's storybooks when they noticed a large smudge hiding in the box's fold. He touched the finger to it and discovered the smudge was wet with ink. Looking closer, he saw it was a seal with an elaborate crest of a black swan and a white swan. On the crest were 3 letters, S-G-E. There was no need for him to guess what the letters meant, and it said so in the banner beneath the crest. Small black words that told the village where the children had gone. The school for good and evil. The kidnappings continued, but now the thief had a name. They called him the schoolmaster. A few minutes after 10, Sophie pried the last lock off the window and cracked open the shutters. She could see to the edge of the forest, where her father Stefan stood with the rest of the perimeter guard. But instead of looking anxious like the others, he was smiling, hand on the widow Hondra's shoulder. Sophie grimaced. What her father saw in that woman, she had no idea. Once upon a time, her mother had been flawless as a storybook queen. Hondra, meanwhile, had a small head, round body, and looked like a turkey. Her father whispered mischievously into the widow's ear, and Sophie's cheeks burned. If it were Handra's 2 little sons who had been taken, he'd be serious as death. True, Stefan had locked her in at sundown, given her a kiss dutifully, acted like the loving father, but Sophie knew the truth. She had seen it in his face every day of her life. Her father didn't love her because she wasn't a boy, because she didn't remind him of himself. Now he wanted to marry the beast. 5 years after her mother's death, it wouldn't be seen as improper or callous. A simple exchange of vows, and he'd have 2 sons, a new family, a fresh start. But he needed his daughter's blessing first for the elders to allow it. The few times he tried, Sophie changed the subject or loudly chopped cucumbers or smiled the way she had at Radley. Her father hadn't mentioned Handra again. Let the coward marry her when I'm gone, she thought, glowering at him through the shutters. Only when she was gone would he appreciate her. Only when she was gone would he know no one could replace her. And only when she was gone would he see she had spawned much more than a son. He had borne a princess. On her windowsill, Sophie laid out gingerbread hearts for the schoolmaster with delicate care. For the first time in her life, she had made them with sugar and butter. These were special, after all, a message to say she'd come willingly. Sinking into her pillow, she closed her eyes on widows, fathers, and wretched Galvadin with a smile and counted seconds to midnight. As soon as Sophie's head vanished beneath the window, Agatha shoved the gingerbread hearts into her mouth. Only these things will invite rats, she thought, crumbs dribbling on her black clump shoes. She yawned and set on her way as the town clock inched past 1/4 hour. Upon leaving Sophie after their walk, Agatha had started home only to have visions of Sophie darting into the woods to find the school for fools and crackpots and ending up gored by a boar. So she returned to Sophie's garden and waited beside the tree, listening as Sophie undid her window, singing a bird-brained song about princes, packed up her bags, now singing about wedding bells, put on her makeup, her finest dress, everybody loves Princess in Pink, and finally tucked herself into bed. Agatha mashed the last crumbs with her clamp and trudged towards the cemetery. Sophie was safe and would wake up tomorrow feeling like a fool. Agatha would rub it in. Sophie would need her even more now, and she would be there for her. Here in this safe, secluded world, the 2 of them would make their own paradise. As Agatha tramped up the slope, she noticed an arc of darkness in the forest torchlit border. Apparently the guards responsible for the cemetery had decided what lived inside wasn't worth protecting. For as long as Agatha could remember, she'd had a talent for making people go away. Kids fled from her like a vampire bat. Adults clung to the walls as she passed, afraid she might curse them. Even the gravekeepers on the hill bolted at the sight of her. With each new year, the whispers in the town grew louder. Witch, villain, evil school, until she looked for excuses not to go out. First days, then weeks, until she haunted her graveyard house like a ghost. There were plenty of ways to entertain herself at first. She wrote poems, It's a Miserable Life, and Heaven is a Cemetery were her best. Drew portraits of Reaper that frightened mice more than a real cat did, and even tried her hand at a book of fairy tales, grimly ever after, about beautiful children who die horrible deaths. But she had no one to show these things to until the day Sophie knocked. Reaper licked her ankles as she stepped into her squeaking porch. She heard singing inside. In the forest primeval, a school for good and evil. Agatha rolled her eyes and pushed open the door. Her mother, back turned, singing cheerfully as she packed a trunk with black capes, broomsticks, and pointy witches' hats. 2 towers like twin heads, one for pure and one for the wicked.
Damn, her mom's practically shipping her off, too.
Bye! Bye, Felicia.
Look, I even packed her bag for you, headmaster.
Broomsticks and everything. Try to escape, you'll always fail. The only way out is through a fairy tale. Planning an exotic vacation? Agatha asked. Last time I checked, there's no way out of Galvadin unless you grow wings. Callus turned. Do you think 3 capes is enough? She asked, bugging eyes bulging, hair a greasy black helmet. Agatha winced at how much they looked alike. They're exactly the same, she muttered. Why do you need 3? In case you need to lend one to a friend, dear. These are for me. I put 2 hats in case one gets squashed, a broomstick in case there smells, and a few vials of dog tongues, lizard legs, frog toes. Who knows how long they've been sitting there? Agatha knew the answer, but asked anyway. Mother, do I need capes, hats, and frogs for? For new witch welcoming, of course, Callus trilled. You don't want to get to the school of evil and look like an amateur. Agatha kicked off her clumps. Let's put aside the fact that the town doctor believes all this. Why is it so hard to accept I'm happy here? I have everything I need. My bed, my cat, and my friend. Well, you should learn from your friend, dear. At least she wants something from life, Callus said, latching the trunk. Really, Agatha, what could be a greater destiny than a fairy tale witch? I've dreamed of going to school of evil. Instead, the headmaster took this idiot Sven, who ended up outwitted by a princess and the useless ogre, and set on fire. I'm not surprised. That boy could barely lace his own shoes. I'm sure if the schoolmaster could have done it over again, he would have taken me. Agatha slid under her covers. Well, everyone in this town still thinks you're a witch, so you've got your wish after all. Callus whipped around. My wish is for you to get away from this, she hissed, eyes dark as coal. This place has made you weak and lazy and afraid. At least I made something for myself here. You just waste and rot until Sophie comes to walk you like a dog. Rude.
Intense.
I know.
Whoa, Mother of the Year award right there.
I know.
Burn.
Agatha stared at her, stunned. Callus smiled brightly and resumed packing. But do you take care of your friend, dear? The school for good might seem like a festoon of roses, but she's in for a surprise. Now go to bed. The schoolmaster will be here soon, and it's easy for him when you're asleep. Agatha pulled the sheets up over her head. Sophie couldn't sleep. 5 minutes to midnight and no sign of an intruder. She knelt on her bed and peered through the shutters. Around Galvadin's edge, a 1,000-person guard waved torches to light up the forest. Sophie scowled. How could he get past them? That's when she noticed the hearts on her windowsill were gone. He's already here! 3 packed pink bags plopped through the window, followed by 2 glass-slippered feet.
You can resume, I'm sorry.
Agatha lurched up in bed, jolted by a nightmare. Callus snored loudly across the room, Reaper at her side. Next to Agatha's bed sat her locked trunk marked Agatha of Galvadin, 1 Graves Hill Road, in scraggly writing, along with a pouch of honey cakes for the journey. Chomping cake, Agatha gazed through the cracked window down the hill. The torches blazed in a tight circle, but here on Graves Hill, there was just 1 burly guard left. Arms as big as Agatha's whole body, legs like chicken drumsticks. He kept himself awake by lifting a broken headstone like a barbell. Agatha bit into the last honey cake and looked out into the dark forest. Shiny blue eyes looked back at her. Agatha choked and dove to her bed. She lifted her head. Nothing there, including the guard. She found herself unconscious over the broken head.
She then found him.
Oh, sorry. She then found him unconscious over the broken headstone, torch extinguished. Creeping away from him was a bony, hunchback's human shadow. No body attached. The shadow floated across the sea of graves without the slightest sign of hurry. It slid under the cemetery gates and skulked down the hill towards the firelit center of Galvadin. Agatha felt horror strangle her heart. He was real, whoever he was. And he doesn't want me. Relief crashed over her, followed by a fresh wave of panic. Sophie. She should wake her mother. She should cry for help. She should... No time. Feigning sleep, Callus heard Agatha's urgent footsteps, then the door closed. She hugged Reaper tighter to make sure he didn't wake up. Sophie crouched beneath a tree, waiting for the schoolmaster to snatch her. She waited and waited. Then she noticed something in the ground. Cookie crumbs mashed into a footprint. The footprint of a clump so odorous, so foul, it could only belong to one person. Sophie's fist curled. Her blood boiled. Hands covered her mouth and a foot booted her through the wait, what?
And a foot booted her through the window.
Okay, I read that right. Booted her through the window. Sophie crashed headfirst onto her bed, whirled around to see Agatha. "You pathetic, interfering worm!" she screamed before glimpsing the fear in her friend's face. "You saw him!" Sophie gasped. Agatha put one hand over Sophie's mouth and pinned her to the mattress with the other. As Sophie writhed in protest, Agatha peeped through the window. The crooked shadow drifted into Galvadin Square, past the obvious armed guard, and headed directly for Sophie's house. Agatha swallowed a scream. Sophie wrenched free and grabbed her shoulders. "Is he handsome? Like a prince? Or a proper schoolmaster with spectacles and a waistcoat and thump?" Sophie and Agatha slowly turned to the door. Thump, thump. Sophie wrinkled her nose. He could just knock, couldn't he? Locks cracked. Hinges rattled. Agatha shrank against the wall while Sophie folded her hands and fluffed her dress as if expecting a royal visit. "Best give him what he wants without a fuss." As the door caved, Agatha leapt off the bed and threw herself against it. Sophie rolled her eyes. "Oh, sit down, for goodness sake." Agatha pulled the knob with all her might, lost her grip. The door slammed open with a deafening crack, hurling her across the room. It was Sophie's father, white as a sheet. "I saw something coming," he panted, waving his torch. Then Agatha caught the crooked shadow on the wall, stepping into his broad silhouette. "There!" she cried. Stefan swiveled, but the shadow blew out his torch. Agatha grabbed a match from her pocket and lit it. Stefan lay on the ground unconscious. Sophie was gone. Screams outside. Through the window, Agatha watched shouting villagers chase after Sophie as the shadow dragged her towards the woods, and while more and more villagers howled and chased. Sophie smiled ear to ear.
Oh my god.
Oh my goodness.
Agatha lunged through the window and ran after her, but just as the villagers reached Sophie, their torches magically exploded and trapped them in rings of fire. Agatha dodged the gauntlet of fire traps and dashed to save her friend before the shadow pulled her into the forest. Sophie felt her body leave soft grass and rake against the stony dirt. She frowned at the thought of showing up at school with a soiled dress. "I really thought there'd be a footman," she said to the shadow, "or a pumpkin carriage at least." Agatha ran furiously, but Sophie had almost disappeared into the trees. All around, flames spewed higher and higher, poised to devour the entire village. Seeing the fires leap, Sophie felt relief knowing no one could rescue her now. But where is the second child? Where is the one for evil? She had been wrong about Agatha all along, as she felt herself being pulled into the trees. Sophie looked back at the towering blaze and kissed goodbye to the curse of an ordinary life. "Farewell, Galvadin! Farewell, low ambition! Farewell, mediocrity!" Then she saw Agatha charge through the flames. "Agatha, no!" Sophie cried. Agatha leapt on top of her, and both were dragged into the darkness. Instantly, the fires around the villagers were extinguished. They dashed for the woods, but the trees magically grew thick and thorny, locking them out. It was too late. Dun, dun, dun. "What are you doing?" roared Sophie, shoving and scratching Agatha as the shadow pulled them into pitch-black forest. Agatha thrashed wildly, trying to wrest the shadow's grip on Sophie and Sophie's grip on the shadow. "You're ruining everything!" Sophie howled. Agatha bit her hand. "Ah!" Sophie brayed and flipped her body so Agatha scraped against the dirt. Agatha flipped Sophie back and climbed towards the shadow, her clump squishing Sophie's face. "When my hands find your neck!" They felt themselves leave the ground. As something spindly and cold wrapped its way around them, Agatha fumbled for a match from her dress, struck it against her bony wrist, and paled. The shadow was gone. They were cocooned in the creepers of an elm, which furled them up an enormous tree and plopped them on the lowest branch. Both girls glared at each other and tried to catch enough breath to speak. Agatha managed it first. "We are going home right now." The branch wobbled, coiled back like a sling, and shot them like bullets. Before either could scream, they landed on another branch. Agatha flailed for a new match, but the branch coiled and snapped them snap them up to the next bough, which bounced them to the next. How tall is this tree? Agatha shrieked, ping-ponging up branches. The girls' bodies collided and crashed, dresses tearing on thorns and twigs, faces slamming into ricocheting limbs, until finally they reached the highest bough. There at the top of the elm tree sat a giant black egg. The girls gasped at it, baffled. The egg tore open, splashing them in dark, yolky goo. As a colossal bird emerged, made only of bones. It took one look at the pair and unleashed an angry screech that rattled their eardrums. Then it grabbed them both in its claws and dove off the tree as they screamed, finally agreeing on something. The bony bird lashed through the black woods as Agatha frantically lit a match after match on the bird's ribs, giving them catches of glinting red eyes and bristling shadows. All around, gangly trees snatched the girls as the bird dipped and climbed to avoid them, until thunder exploded ahead and they smashed headfirst into a raging lightning storm. Firebolts sent trees careening towards them as they shielded their faces from rain and timber, ducked cobwebs, beehives, and vipers until the bird plunged into deadly briars and the girls blanched, closing their eyes to the pain. Then all was quiet. Agatha? Agatha opened her eyes to rays of sunshine. She looked down and gasped. It's real. Far beneath them, two soaring castles sprawled across the forest. One castle glinted in sun mist, with pink and blue glass turrets over a sparkling lake. The other loomed blackened and jagged, sharp spires ripping through thunderclouds like teeth of a monster. The school for good and evil. The bony bird drifted over the towers of good, loosened Sophie from its claws. Agatha clutched her friend in horror, but then saw Sophie's face glowing with happiness. Aggie, I'm a princess! But the bird dropped Agatha instead. Stunned, Sophie watched Agatha plummet into pink cotton candy mist. Wait, no! The bird swooped savagely towards the towers of evil, its jaws reaching up for new prey. No, I'm good! It's the wrong one! Sophie screamed, and without a beat, she was dropped into the hellish darkness.
Boom.
Boom.
Oh, we all kind of called it.
Well, I mean, I kind of told you guys ahead of time that was gonna happen. But
I think it was on the back of the book.
Was it?
Yeah,
I think so.
I think that was. I was like, I think I read the.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yep, right there.
Reversed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure like that's like part of the plot in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like
So, well, I guess we will see how Agatha takes to glitter and
And pink.
how Sophie takes to the darkness.
Yep.
Yeah, this will be
Which
interesting.
is
Even if you learn good things or evil things, it still does not matter because in the end, it's what you do with it, right? So
Exactly.
there is still any way this could go.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, cucumber juice is kind of like a potion, right?
Kinda.
She was doing well. She also had like turtle eggs and stuff, and like
Yeah.
cow's tongue, you know. So
Part
she
of,
was
like, her face
definitely.
routine.
She was already doing some potion-y stuff already.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how she survives. I think she's gonna find that she has more common with it than not, and it's gonna surprise
Because
her.
everything she did was it was always selfish.
Manipulation, Yeah.
Yeah.
Selfish.
So
Lots
you know,
of manipulation.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So.
Speaking of furry people visiting for the interviews
Yeah.
with our fur friends.
I know. He
Friends.
came over a couple of times.
Yeah.
He tried to sit up, but his back feet fell off, and he was like, "Going down."
Going down.
Any predictions?
I don't know if I have any predictions. I just think that Sophie's going to be very reluctant to, I guess, learn and grow for her own self when in the School of Evil. I think she's going to have a lot of problems with it at first.
I actually don't think that, just because I feel like Sophie's so angry now that Agatha got what she wanted,
Maybe.
that anger is going to corrupt and fester. And whereas I think Agatha is going to be like so worried about her friend.
Trying to escape there.
Yeah.
To get her.
So that's kind of
Possibly.
what I'm thinking would happen.
Yeah.
So, well, we'll see.
Well, we'll see. Let us know what you guys think.
Until next time.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye.